years, and I'm also just curious.
Yeah. So Yash, why don't we start with you telling us about yourself and the journey that led to this book. So from your birth to this book.
God, no question.
Yeah.
Born and raised in Delhi, don't really identify as a Delhi girl, live in Bangalore and really feel much more connected to this particular city. I've been in the corporate world for about 17 years before retiring myself at the age of 40 and taking up a career using transactional analysis as my base to become a psychotherapist. And over the last 3.5 years, trained with the Couples Institute to be a couples therapist and enjoying the intensity of this work. And as a writer, this is my 10th book, which beyond a point gets a little embarrassing to say. Great. And I'm very happy that I've been able to put down in a book what I really genuinely wish someone had told me when I was getting married about 23 years ago. And we have survived and we're hopefully thriving. And my work as a couples therapist has actually been very helpful in that journey. And we have 3 children and a dog. And I am very happy and proud to be here. And I sit here with a lot of joy and gratitude, Aruna. So I'm very happy to see everybody over here today.
I'm sure everybody is also very happy to be here, and quite a journey this is. Huh? I see you introducing yourself these days as couples therapist and author.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is so not therapist, couples therapist and author. So 10 books, but author comes after couples therapist. So is there something to this? Is your primary identity as a couples is one of being a couples therapist?
I think my primary identity is one of being a couples therapist, but it's also that it's my most recent identity and feels most alive to me right now. At this stage in my life, I've kind of given up trying to have one fixed identity.
Yeah.
So possibly when you meet me 3 years from now, I'll be saying something else as the primary identity. And I've learned to be very okay with that because that's
Yeah.
how I'm wired, I think, to just try new things, learn, go really deep, and
Yeah.
keep moving. So
Yeah.
facing that journey.
Yeah. And I think you started as a therapist a few years ago, and I am so aware being having traversed that journey with you, how drawn you were to couples therapy and
Yeah.
how quickly you took to it like fish to water. Uh, and so tell me, what is fundamentally different? Is it just an extension of individual therapy? What must the audience know about what makes couples therapy different from individual therapy?
Yeah, I want to start by saying you've traversed this journey with me. I mean, we've had so many different ways of collaborating, right? You've been my trainer, supervisor, co-author. We've done workshops and group therapy together.
Yes.
And I just love how it keeps evolving. So yeah, I think more than anyone else, you've seen me closely on this journey.
Yeah.
And it's true that from the beginning, I began to notice in my practice that a lot of people, me being an ex kind of corporate MBA type of person, made an Excel file at one point and saw that 2/3 of my individual therapy clients were talking about their primary relationship as the primary issue.
Yeah.
So I realized that this is something that needs attention. And I was surprised to find when I began to research it that it's actually very, very different. Framework is different, the context is different. We now have two people in the room who are quite angry with each other in most cases. The dynamic is immediately different when there are more than two people in the room.
Yeah.
It requires a lot more structure and a strong framework to be able to contain the tension in the room and to keep moving the couple forward. They come in with very different goals. So, in so many ways, it's actually an entirely different ball game.
Yeah. I can imagine that. Yeah. Yeah. Because we would be in individual therapy. I bring to you my vision and my side of the story, and the same story, if I have to say in the presence of another, I might not even be able to say it. Yeah. And then somebody says something, it immediately stirs me up. It's a real dialogue. It's in a way therapy and mediation and holding space and conflict resolution. It's a whole lot of different competencies, right? Also staying, it may be a lot more tense and real is what I'm imagining.
It is because mostly people come in for couples therapy after some years of having a lot of repeated negative, entrenched,
Yeah.
dialogue with each other, and they're
Yeah.
stuck in a pattern. I'm happy to say that some people are coming in earlier now, but in general, it does take a long time. Research in the US shows couples wait for 6 years with serious problems before even venturing into couples therapy. I'd say in India, it's probably even longer than that.
Yeah.
That's one thing that changes it. The other is that in couples therapy, I see my role as not just a therapist. It's actually that of a therapist and somebody who's really coaching people, and also an educator. Because what I like to think is that they should walk away with some real skills on how to be in relationship with each other. So it's
Yeah.
a lot more goal oriented, it's a lot more concrete. And I
Yeah.
think one major difference is that with individual therapy, we have often the luxury of time and a long term relationship.
Yeah.
With couples therapy, we may not always have that. So to be able to set goals and to actually make progress
Yeah.
and leave them in a state where they're able to walk away in a better shape in the relationship is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. So being a coach and an educator on how to be in it, I mean, sometimes it may need some very fundamental communication skills training as well, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because see, the fact is that the adult romantic primary relationship is one of the most defining factors for our happiness. Okay, and that is actually research proven. Harvard
Yes.
did a study on this. And yet, the irony of it is that some of the most important things in our lives we are just not prepared for. It's not like they teach us these skills in school.
Yeah.
Right? So, from a purely practical perspective, folks actually may not know how to communicate. But even one step before that, we aren't really taught to go inward and know even what we are feeling, wishing, and desiring.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it can be some pretty basic work in a very complex situation that needs to also
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the therapeutic principles of how we are unaware of ourselves, but we project it on the other.
Yeah,
If we don't feel we are lovable, we'll say the other doesn't love me. Yeah. And some of these ideas can be very alien, isn't it?
totally, totally. And so there is that aspect of projecting a part of ourselves that we are not owning.
Yeah.
There's very much the idea of what we call transference, right? Which is that we bring from the past the
Yeah.
relationships that are not resolved and are yearning from when we were young children.
Yeah.
Both naturally and innocently and naively bring them into the context of our adult relationship. And we want our partner to be that person who will heal us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, that is where a lot of the therapy work does come in. That is where we do need to also sit and examine where do these yearnings come from? What is the role of the past and those old relationships that is showing up in this relationship today?
Yeah. And that's one of your first chapters, isn't it? Where you explain how the past actually determines who we are even attracted to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we may be attracted to a person who reminds us of one of our parents. So we say you might actually be getting married to one of your parent figures. Yeah. Do you want to start by talking about that?
I want to say how uncanny this is. This is an unconscious process of, even if we determine that we will never be like one of our parents, we
Yeah.
end up repeating a lot of what they did
Yeah.
unconsciously.
Yeah.
And even if we say that I want to find a very different person from my parents, there is something in us which attracts us at a very unconscious level to someone who's likely to give us the same experiences that we had as a little kid, the
Mm.
same disappointments. And we
Mm.
know Freud calls this repetition compulsion,
Yeah.
the idea that we do all of this in a very, again, unconscious attempt to create a different experience as a part of the healing.
Yeah.
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 So that does happen, and it's really uncanny how many times people make that connection when they actually sit down and think about these things.
Yeah.
The other aspect of this is it's not just my relationship with my mother or my father, which will uh, have an impact on who I end up choosing. It's also that I'll end up creating in my relationship what my mother and father had with each other,
Their dynamics.
their dynamic, that template. And I think that is also a very important piece of the work. And it's part of the history that I take with every new client, which is to really examine what were your parents' relationship with each other like.
Yeah. 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 It's quite interesting, isn't it? I think even Raj and I had done this work on transgenerational scripts, right? Where we didn't look just at the immediate parents, but also grandparents.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what were the relationship patterns there, and how they sometimes get transmitted across generations, because that becomes the template for marriages. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that one of the things I've realized I find most satisfying about couples work that I have the opportunity to see a whole system change. That's again the thing missing in individual therapy, right? You can see their dynamics evolve, they practice in the room in front of you. And then as a therapist, I know that this is impacting their larger family. So they're really breaking some intergenerational patterns and cycles. They're doing, I think going into couples therapy is very courageous work. I had someone just this morning say in a form that I'm scared. I don't know what she'll bring up. And it's true because you never know what your partner is going to reveal about you in this space to a relative stranger. So a lot of my work is creating rapport and safety and enabling people to take risks in the containing structure of the therapy.
I'm aware I have so many questions, but is this a good place to pause and bring the audience in?
I think so. So, audience, what we thought is that instead of reserving space at the end for questions, we'll actually just pause every few minutes and make it very interactive. So, would love to hear from you what's on your mind as you heard us talk about this. Do you have comments? You have questions? You can throw them out here right now.
And resonances, if something rings true for you, you can talk about that. Yeah.
And just to keep it moving, if we can keep those short, then we can cover a lot more content.
Yeah.
I see Preeti. Preeti, you want to say something?
Yes. Hi. My question is, and because I'm training to be a therapist, I'm in my third year of CTA with Aruna. We are getting into the heart of relational work. And I'm very curious about how countertransference works when you work with couples. And how do you sort of, it feels it's way more complicated when you are working with two people in the room.
Yeah, what a lovely question. I also actually identify as a relational therapist. So for those of you who may not be so familiar with the term, essentially it means that the therapist uses their own self, their whole being, to be in authentic relationship with the client. And in my individual therapy, I do that. I really try to come in and I pay attention to my own responses to the client. As appropriate, I might bring it up. We do also talk about how our own relationship is evolving. In the couples therapy space, I think it is equally important. In fact, I often get a lot of information about their dynamic by noting my own responses to the client. Okay, how I use it might be different, but I'll give you an example. So if there is a particular partner who I feel is not trusting of me as a therapist, and I can actually feel myself wanting to please that person and wanting to prove to them that I know what I'm doing, it's actually giving me information possibly on how other people in this person's life, especially their partner, might be perceiving them as mistrusting and critical and having the pressure to prove and please. So that is something, that's an example of how I might use that information to understand this person better, to understand their dynamic, to understand what the husband might be feeling in this case. I may even bring it up in the therapy. I may actually sometimes say, I feel like I'm having to prove myself to you. I'm working very hard over here.
Yeah, shall just mute everyone, then you can unmute because there's some noise.
Sure.
Yeah, you can unmute now and talk. Yeah.
So I was saying that in some cases, I might actually choose to bring it in the therapy room and I might reveal how I am experiencing that person. And there are a couple of advantages to that. One is it models to the partner how one can bring up an issue without being attacking. It also, in a way, validates that partner. So they now have a better understanding and they don't feel so alone. And if this is done well, then even the person who I'm giving that feedback to might learn something and maybe less defensive hearing it from me than they are when they hear it from their partner. So I absolutely love using a lot of the work from our training in TA, especially the relational piece, in this work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Maybe one more question and then.
Okay, Paras has written in chat. How do you keep talking when you
don't at all feel like talking? I don't understand the question.
I can, sorry. Can I Can I step in, Aruna? I'm sorry, I am not able to be on camera because I'm somewhere out.
No worries.
But I'm fascinated here. I want to share a small observation about couples as a couple, about 18 years back when, I recently got married, and, a couple of years later we had a kid. I think that couples going for therapy itself, choosing to go for therapy itself is a very positive sign. I think that they believe that there is an opportunity for redemption, as opposed to couples who feel like they've come to a point where therapy is not going to work. So as this was being discussed, I was just feeling like, I had a cousin and they had gotten married, and one of them felt like we need therapy. The other one says, I think you need therapy, not me. Right. So I think two people going for therapy is in itself, I mean, whatever happens in the therapy happens, whether it's blame or complaining or whatever. But I think this act of just choosing to go for therapy together in itself is a very positive, to me, I mean, as I read this, is a very positive message, which is that we're open and we're willing to work on it, and we think that we can go on the other side of it stronger as a couple.
Kamal, so thank you. That was Kamal, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I want to underline what you're saying. I think, like I said, it's a very courageous step. It really takes a lot of strength, and it's a risk that I really love stroking. So when couples come in, I really stroke the hell out of them to let them know that they're doing a very progressive thing. I do have to say, however, that when couples come in for therapy, it's not always to grow in the marriage. Sometimes they come in a very jaded state. Sometimes one partner or both might actually want to leave. Sometimes they're there to make an important decision. So there are various agendas people come in with. But definitely, in many, many cases, the very fact that they've shown up for the therapy is something which is very progressive and worth reminding them that it's a strong step that they're taking. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I want to say I've read Paris and Kajol's questions also, and maybe we can come back to that. Is that okay?
Sure. So I think the next question anyway that I was planning to ask was what themes do you see in the kinds of issues that couples bring in therapy? Are there themes? Are there some common issues that you see in Indian marriages?
Yeah. What I have seen in Indian marriages is actually very similar to what I think research shows about marriages worldwide. Okay. Common things that people tend to talk about. Now we're talking about topics. The topics they come in with would be typically something like communication issues, real problems with emotional connection, problems with sexual connection, difficulty in handling conflict well, topics like the in-laws and differences in how they parent. I don't know if I mentioned money, and of course, sex and sexual desire discrepancy, and the in-laws. I would say that that's perhaps one which gets quite a bit of emphasis over here, given the way that our families and our societies are structured. But if I think about it, these are the main topics that people seem to come in with.
Yeah, I think in our culture, parents are involved in their children's life so much more than children, and I'm talking about adult children.
Yeah.
So therefore, those dynamics I think will interfere in the relationship, and that maybe I can imagine that that's a lot more in India. What about infidelity?
Yes, infidelity is one as well. So people do come in. Sometimes they come in when there has just been the discovery of the infidelity. And that's a real crisis because it's a major betrayal for the hurt partner. And often these are the couples who are on the brink of a decision. And in this case, it may sometimes be that they want to work on it. It may also be that one partner has completely checked out, or the other partner, who's the hurt partner in this case, is not forgiving them. So it's pretty complex. And I have to say, I think I have a bit of a soft spot for this work. I find the general narrative around infidelity very simplistic. I think people are very quick to judge and say, oh, just leave him or just leave her, or how could she cheat? Be a man, have some self-respect. these can be very confusing voices that don't take into account the complexity of a real life situation. Where in the marriage, it's entirely possible that the distance had been building up for a long time. Sometimes the partner who cheated has really been crying loudly in the marriage for more connection, whether sexual or physical. So to villainize one partner, I think, is something very unfortunate that we do. And I like bringing in nuance and hope in such cases.
Lovely. Yeah. So what does it take? So if we talk about the book, so all of these things that you've said, I think are chapters in your book. There's a chapter about money. There's a chapter about in-laws. There's a chapter about affairs.
Yeah.
And I think I see each chapter followed by a set of questions. How are you hoping that couples, for whom is this book? Yeah, and how are you hoping that whoever's reading it is using those questions at the end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Originally, the idea for this book stemmed from what I was creating as a marriage preparation workshop, because I really thought it will be great to give people information early. And in the process of creating that course, I realized it could be a book. But I also realized that it's not just for people who are newly married or about to get married, because I think people can struggle for years, decades, and even a whole lifetime if they don't get some basic information. So this book really is for anyone who wants to improve their relationship, whether they are yet single or partnered, whether they are recently married or have been married for years and years. And the questions at the end, I think, were a really important touch. And I have been so pleased to hear examples of how couples are apparently, spending 15 minutes reading a chapter and then a full 1.5 hours on the reflective questions at the end.
Fantastic.
I think that's the best possible use case for the book, because they're really getting to know their own patterns. They're getting to do this as a team together. And I spent quite a bit of time designing those questions. I think that's where the therapist in me really came out and put together something that would help people integrate what they're reading. So I think the inclusion of those questions has really made this book into a workbook. So I'm really pleased about that.
Yeah. And if couples can if couples are willing to look inwards and reflect, that's half the battle won, isn't it? Rather than looking out and wanting the other to change. So I think if people are doing that, then that's a lot of hope.
Yes, it's a handful of such stories I heard, but they are very heartening. I also want to say, Aruna, that the later chapters in the book are organized by topics. So there is a chapter on money, there's a chapter on affairs, sex, parenting, so on. And I wanted to pick up the most common issues that people struggle with. I had a chapter on addiction, which the editors took out because it seemed perhaps a bit too niche to them. But I do also want to say that the first half of the book is where we're not focusing so much on content, but we're focusing on some very common phenomenon. And that is where I think it's important to talk about the stages of development. It was such a gift for me to learn about the fact that every couple goes through stages of development, just like a child would go through some stages of development. It helped me so much as a therapist to have this framework. It's created by Ellen Bader and Pete Pearson, who are now in their 70s, but still teaching. I've been lucky enough to have them as my teachers and mentors in this model. And essentially what they discovered is that in the beginning stages, every couple goes through this honeymoon bonding period, very, very important stage to establish, some strengths and create some good memories. It is inevitable that they will move on to stage 2. And that's actually where most couples get stuck. That second stage is called the stage of emerging differences or differentiation. And this is where the, rosy honeymoon sunset feel fades away and reality begins to set in. And the partners involved realize that they are really genuinely different from each other. And that can be quite a rude shock, because when they initially got together, they really did so under this illusion of fantasy, which is often fed by our Bollywood romances, as much as it is by our own innate chemistry. So it is very difficult for them at this stage to accept that their partner is different. And like we established earlier, nobody really taught them how to talk about these differences in a way that is safe. So if that does not happen, then couples tend to get stuck in two types of dynamic. Either they will be hostile, reactive, fighting, really, really enmeshed with each other, or they may become conflict avoidant. They're still reactive to each other, but they are simply avoiding conflict. And both of these styles of being can lead to a lot of disconnection over the long term. So the fact of differentiation is the core of the work that I do with most couples, because that's where they get stuck.
Okay. So is it important to tell the group about the other stages as well, or just letting the group know that your partner is an independent person? This whole cultural message that one completes the other, and this whole cultural contamination that you get everything you need from one person, and love is just being enmeshed. Some of those, so that the differentiation that we can be two autonomous individuals with our own interests. We don't have to do everything together. It doesn't mean we don't love each other. If we give each other space, it doesn't mean there's no love.
Yeah.
Yes, all of these are such strongly held contaminations, isn't it?
Yeah, they are. I want to say that the word differentiation, I think, unfortunately, doesn't connote the nuance of how connected partners still can be.
Yeah.
Differentiation people tend to confuse with individuation, which is I'm a separate person, you're a separate person. But actually, what differentiation is the art of being oneself as a whole person, but really being strongly connected to the partner. So you're differentiated in the relationship with your partner. I also think it's important to tell people that, in brief, what are the other three stages. In fact, telling this to my couples creates a lot of hope. If differentiation skills are learned, then the partners can move on to the other three stages. The next one is actually called exploration. That is closer to individuation. That means that I have a secure base, and now I can really go out and turn to the world and have a lot of mastery, establish myself and my identity, knowing that my partner is very much there. They're not going anywhere. Actually, what tends to happen if people don't differentiate properly, one partner may skip over the stage into exploration, and they may get addicted to their work. They may look outside the marriage. This is actually when things like infidelity and affairs tend to happen, because they just turn away from the marriage without that secure base. But if they do it well, they both get to explore their identities in a safe way. And then there is a stage called reconnection or rapprochement, which we call in child development theory, turning back to each other, reconnecting with a sweeter, more tender intimacy than ever before. And finally, the stage of synergy, which I think for me, my mentors, Ellen and Pete, really is, they embody that, because they're a couple who's very different from each other, but they're strongly connected. And at that final stage of synergy, you have so much extra energy because of the team that you are, that you can create a lot of value for the world. And you can really do a lot of service, whether large or small, for the people around you. So it's a very beautiful vision that I like to paint for couples who are coming in, to say that if you get this right, that's what you can be. And that provides a lot of hope.
Sounds enticing, even as you describe it. Yeah. Shall we open it up for some questions? I think there are some more questions on chat. Okay, Madhu has a question.
Okay, quite a few have come in. I just want to, I'm guessing at Paras, your question, how do you keep talking when you don't at all feel like talking? To me, this sounds like the question from the perspective not of a therapist, but of someone in relationship who may sometimes be pushed by their partner to talk, and also not clear why we are mad at the partner. To me, these questions indicate that the person who is asking this question really needs to be able to go inward and figure out what is going on for them. This also happens when there's a lot of overwhelm. So I see a pattern, for example, where one partner may be very communicative, may really be, badgering the other partner to talk. But the other partner's coping mechanism, and not to be sexist here, but often this is the man, they may simply not have been trained in the art of emotional literacy or even knowing what they feel. So I would say that the first step in this work is really having the space to be able to do your own personal work, and establishing some safety with your partner and taking some risks to reveal that you're not rejecting them when you don't talk. It's just that you're genuinely overwhelmed and don't want to cause harm. You don't know what's going on for yourself. So there's no simple answer to this, but it revolves around some amount of vulnerability, self-awareness, and taking the risk for self-expression. Kajol asked, I'm wondering how the therapeutic relationship is seen with couples. We look at the therapeutic relationship as one of the markers of change. How do we look at that in couples work? So Kajol, I think this question goes back to the use of relational work in psychotherapy. And I do want to say that in individual work, we do have a lot more luxury to explore the relationship between me as a therapist and the client. May not always have that luxury. So it may be important to actually keep the couple's relationship at the forefront. Because what also tends to happen is couples therapy is often briefer than individual therapy. And so it is more goal oriented. So the use of the therapeutic relationship is more in the background than at the forefront. I can't make myself too central in that relationship. Having said that, I mark how I feel in the relationship. I'm also wondering if someone would like to unmute and ask a question, and we can always come back to the ones in chat.
Yes, I wanted to ask a question. You've talked about this in the past, but I still have this. And, as a therapist, I find myself often working with one side of a couple, either the wife or the husband. And I've had this question, like I've said before, is that I recognize that when I'm working with one person, sometimes I do find myself seeing if the client could consider couples therapy, given the issue they have brought forward. And sometimes I find they're not ready. Either the partner is not ready or they're not ready to make the investment.
Yeah.
And then I struggle with, not a struggle, but I wonder what I can do to keep them, to not get them, not to get myself completely myopic just from their point of view, but to get them to understand the system the way they would much better if they were in couples therapy. I don't know if I'm articulating that right, but sometimes am I too much on their side? Am I really being that neutral voice that I could be in the absence of couples therapy? I sometimes wonder about that. Is there ways for me to assess that or be aware of that while I work with clients?
No, I think your question is not just clear. I think it's very important. It comes to the heart of why I shifted from being an individual therapist alone to a couples therapist. And by the way, I still do individual therapy. Half of my clientele is still individual clients. But what I realized is I was making some mistakes in the early part of my career. And I realized that this is something that many individual therapists inadvertently do. We may actually tend to over empathize with the person sitting in front of us. We may tend to hear only their side of the story and take it as true. We may, in a bid to support them, even diagnose their partner. We may imply that the relationship is hopeless. Okay. And all of these things discount the person who's not there. Now, in cases of actual abuse, I think it's very important for us as therapists to be able to call it out. We are, in fact, the voice of sanity for somebody who's confused and is being genuinely mistreated by their partner. But often it does happen that we are simply hearing one side of the story, and in our eagerness to be with our client, we're just discounting the person who's not in the room. I think the first step is really awareness. So even asking this question, having it's a very ethical question to ask, which is, am I really doing justice to the overall system, or am I over empathizing? I also feel this is where our intuition and our relationship can actually become very helpful, because if we do use the relationship, we may discover, if we allow ourselves to really feel what the client is bringing out in us, it can be very important data for what they might be doing to other people in their lives, including the client's partner. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it really starts with that awareness and thinking about it. And also being aware that as per research, it's apparently very common. There's a research 2022, Doherty et al., which talks about how 50% of the therapists, it was a small sample study, but about 50% of them admitted to have at some point made relationship undermining statement. Okay. And that's a very high number. So to indicate that there's something wrong with your partner, or maybe, you should call it off. So it's something for all of us who are in individual therapy practice to be aware of. Yeah, it was really a wake-up call for me.
Thanks.
Okay.
There are two hands up for a while now, Madhu and Akshay.
I'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Yash. So first, I want to resonate with your statement of finding a new identity. That's exactly I am doing, and I kind of resonate with that so much that I know that in 3 years, I'll be definitely talking about a new identity. So I am working with some couples recently, and what I want to bring to you is that I often see them say, "I am tired," and that's kind of a loaded phrase, So the intention to work towards intimacy, towards building the relationship is there. But this one word means very different for women and very different for men. So I want to understand, how do you work with that? Or like what I'm asking is same words, but they are lived differently in the partner. So how do you work with that?
Yeah, so first of all, I think given that people come in to do this work after years of the same negative pattern, it's quite natural that they would be tired. Okay. I think my task, first and foremost, is to help them see that A, there is a reason they got together in the first place, and to connect with that, and to recognize that the future that they can build together can be very different, but it will take a lot of work. So I'm not shy about telling people that this is going to be hard work. In fact, it's peppered all over my book, because I think setting that expectation is important. It is hard and it's intense work, but it is worth doing. Work worth doing is the part that I really need to help them start to see. I've also learned, Madhu, not to push too hard and work harder than my clients. So they're really too tired and jaded and it's not working and they're not motivated. I no longer see it as my job as their therapist to, be their cheerleader who's relentlessly pushing them to do the work. It does
Yeah.
need to come from within. So I can just hold up a mirror and help them see and make a decision as to whether they're ready to do it or not. As far as the different loading behind the words, yeah, I would say sometimes what I've seen is that with the woman, her tiredness comes from being the one doing all the invisible labor, the emotional labor. Often she's the one who's dragging the husband into therapy, and that itself becomes a point of resentment. So her tiredness is that. And on the other side, the husband's tiredness may have been actually being unrecognized, unappreciated, being badgered into being an emotionally expressive person when it's something that they were never taught. So I do think there are differences in how the tiredness shows up, but it's also very individual. It's not even just gendered.
Right. Yeah. And I have one more question, which is a short one. So do you kind of, in your couples therapy container, do you do any individual therapy also? Like after a few sessions with couples, do you
Yeah.
kind of talk to them individually?
I have a structure wherein I first meet them jointly, then I meet each of the partners individually. That's a very important session for me to get to know each partner at a deep level and also figure out are there any secrets that they're keeping from each other, which are important for me to know. Okay, but after that, most of the work I do in my framework is joint. When the need arises and I feel we're getting stuck, I do ask them for individual sessions. I also work in a collaborative manner with other therapists. So sometimes when I sense that the partners need deeper work, which I don't have the bandwidth for, I'll recommend them to other people and I take the consent that I will be speaking to their individual therapist, because otherwise there can be 3 therapists working in 3 different directions. So even for those people who come in to therapy with me who have their individual therapists, I try and get their consent for at least an occasional conversation with their individual therapist so that we're working in the same direction.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Thank you. I want to come to Akshay, but before that, Fiza is a lawyer saying that in mediation proceedings, she observes how stigma around therapy played a massive role. This is a real pet peeve for me. Like, I just really think that there's so much shame associated with couples therapy that it prevents people from getting the timely help that they need. To me, that's really the real shame. So I would really like to break this idea that there is something shameful about couples therapy. And I think all of us have a role to play in it. How do we react when someone we know is going for couples therapy? Do we say, oh, amazing, good for you, that's so progressive? Or do we say, oh, what's wrong? I hope things are okay. I think that everybody has a role to play over here. And I'm actually really happy that folks are stepping forward into couples therapy. And I think we need more people to step into the skills of being couples therapist. It's a really important space. Okay, thanks, Fiza, for that. Akshay, you want to say your question? And maybe Aruna, after that, we can come back.
Yeah,
Sure.
sorry, it's gonna be a little long. I think I am not a therapist, but I started therapy 1 year after my marriage when I started having communication difficulties with my wife, and it was my first relationship and an arranged marriage, so we didn't really know each other quite well apart from our little bit of courtship time. So I think when, as traditional Indian men, if you get into a marriage, you get in with a lot of expectations and standards also, like you set for yourself. And we always look at what is an ideal marriage. You're not supposed to have any problems, and you're not supposed to talk about your problems to anybody else, and you don't really see adults in your family who've done any conflict resolution, so you don't really have any background to work with, and with your wife. And especially as a Indian man, when you're not in a relationship and you're focusing and you have access to American adult content and you're comparing your bodies with those standards, and those also have a lot of shame and a lot of pressure on yourself, and the frequencies of sexual intercourse, and you try to idealize something that has to be this frequency and that frequency and the bond. So you don't really have a lot of, I think you're just left alone. At least for me, I felt that like I was just left alone in this marriage, where I didn't really have any support or no sort of what do you call, like a supportive sound or someone to look up to whom I could share this. And even with friends and all that, you can't really talk about all that because there's such a personal thing to talk. So I don't know whether it's a question or not, but how do you tackle this sort of
Yeah.
pressure
Yeah.
and shame around it?
Yeah. I think you're speaking to a very, very important emotion. I think whenever I work with couples, I'm very aware that under many, many issues is actually the theme of shame. And somehow the fact that it is not okay to feel this disappointed, that it's not okay to talk about it, so that's really a core theme. And when you spoke of loneliness, I was thinking that it is quite ironic that we enter this one relationship with so much hope. We think that, this person is going to be our confidant, our best friend, our healer, our everything. And suddenly we find that, in fact, one of the things that is making us most unhappy is the relationship itself. So it is, I think you are talking about that fall from grace that happens when the honeymoon phase is ending, but no one has really taught you about the fact that differentiation will happen and how to do it well. And again, this piece about not having anyone to talk to, Akshay, I think that could be a little gender specific, because I do think that men are conditioned to not talk about their feelings, to be stoic, to be strong, to be more action oriented. So I can imagine, and I do know, in fact, of many men who really can stay lonely for years and really try to resolve things within themselves, but it leads to more distance and resentment in the relationship. On the other hand, turning outward to talk to people who aren't trained can actually compound the problems between a couple. So there are risks associated on both sides. But I think in the circumstances you're describing, you did the best possible thing. You got the support of an individual therapist. And I do think that when an individual therapist...
So I've been taking therapy since 6 years.
Sorry?
Yeah. I've been taking therapy since 6 years, so it's been looking a lot inward and trying to understand my patterns and everything. So it's been very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I often tell people, please try for couples therapy, but it is difficult to get both partners in the room. They simply may not be ready. And individual therapy is very much the next best thing. The only thing that I wish for is that individual therapists be really aware, like the way Raj was asking, about how possible biases can show up and how do we work when the other partner is not in the room, but still stay fair to the system. Okay, thank you. This is so.
There are more questions. Yeah, there are more questions on chat. I suppose there are hands up also, but I'll ask you a couple more before we open it up to the group again. So you have written about apology in one of your early chapters. The chapter is called Sorry, Not Sorry, about how the common mistakes that couples make with apologies, and what is a real apology that heals. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite chapters.
Yeah.
Because I think it's, one of those things which is so important. In fact, John Gottman, who's one of the most celebrated names in the world of couples therapy, I read in his book that he wrote that the single most important skill for couples to develop is the skill of repair. So that's when we know that we can terminate therapy, not when they are no longer fighting, but when they know how to find their way back to each other.
Yeah.
And
I'm very tempted to say the equivalent in individual therapy is when people are okay with their flaws, they don't become perfect.
Yeah.
It
is similar, right? It is an acceptance that there will be differences. In the case of couples work, what becomes so important is the concept of how do you repair after a rupture? Because a fight can actually send you, miles apart, or it can be used as a gateway to step back together and know each other even better. And an apology has a very important role to play. And it goes so much beyond the word sorry. In fact, one of my favorite learnings is that if you apologize too fast, you're actually doing disservice. You may just be in a hurry to say, I'm sorry, but now this is putting pressure on the person you've hurt. You may not even really have understood what has hurt them. So effective repair has multiple steps. And I like using John Kedor's model. He talks about the 5 R's of apology, which start from recognition. What have you done that's hurt the partner? Then responsibility, really being able to say this is something that I have done, not something that happened, right? It is about true remorse. That's when the word sorry comes in. It's important to be able to say it, and it depends on how you say it and where you say it from. So that's remorse. Then there is repetition. How do you actually ensure that if it's a big transgression, you're not going to do it again? What are the steps that you've taken? And finally, there is restitution. It's also sometimes important to be able to say, especially when the hurt is large, how can I make it up to you? So it's an elaborate process, especially, and of course, this model is used when there are big transgressions, where somebody's been really hurt or felt cheated. But even on a day-to-day basis, at least the fact of proper recognition and responsibility taking and remorse can be a very healing experience for the partner. And again, it's one of the skills people are not taught. So they'll end up saying things like, I'm sorry, but, or I'm sorry you feel that way, or but what about when you did this? So those are all non-apologies that make things worse.
Yeah. And I think an apology is complex, because both parties are hurt sometimes, and it requires so much generosity to own your own contribution, and perhaps let go. There's so much letting go. How the other person receives the apology. Often people don't know how to receive an apology. They'll be flogging the person who's apologizing, so inviting the defense back up again.
Yeah.
Also, sometimes people are invited to apologize. We talk about games, right? I think that's another chapter, which is a very interesting chapter. Maybe we talk about this and see if there's how games complicate an apology sometimes. Tell us about your chapter on games.
Yeah.
Games in a marriage. Yeah. Psychological games.
Yes. I want to come to that. Something you said felt very important to underline. Two people are hurt often. It's not so simple as one person having crossed the line.
Yeah.
I think it's Ellen Bader whose quote I really like, which is that it is in kindergarten where we are first taught the skills of taking turns. And then as we grow up, we forget it. So in couples therapy, often I do have to really invite the partners to slow down and take turns. And I have to assure the partner who's in the role of the listener that in the next session or 2 sessions later, they will get their chance to speak their piece. But for now, they have to put aside, as difficult as it is, they have to put aside their own hurt and feelings, at least enough to be able to properly hear their partner. And that's when some amount of healing can take place, when both partners are. Okay.
Yeah. And I can imagine how difficult that can be if there's an internal urge to correct or fix or give their counterpoint. So that learning itself and sitting with it itself can be quite a transformative thing.
It is. And that's the part of me being a coach and an educator. I have to be very active in that process. So if I can see one partner getting agitated, wanting to interrupt their partner, wanting to defend and correct, I do have to step in and remind them what their role is for this session and what it is in service of. So it is active work, unlike individual therapy, where you can step back and let the client lead.
Yeah, I think the coaching and education is a big part of individual work also. But I can see that there are so many myths. I think it's so many myths. Some of it can evolve more slowly in an individual session. But here the pressure and the intensity may require the stronger stepping in with clear features.
I'll say, Aruna, one of the tenets of our training is that we can benefit a lot in individual therapy from being 3 steps behind the client.
Yeah.
In couples therapy, if I do that, then the session is lost. And in fact, their trust in me as a therapist is lost because they need someone to be able to control and contain. So the structuring parent part of my role is very strong in couples therapy. So that's the difference. I'm the leader in both.
It's a very significant difference. You are in charge of maintaining otherwise it can just degenerate into a bickering or a fight or something that's worse.
Yeah, I have to say, many people who come into couples therapy and even friends I know have complained that therapists who sat back and let them fight in session, it really worsened things. So that's
Yeah.
one of the negative experiences with couples therapy that some folks are sitting with.
Yeah. Yeah.
On games couples play, that's actually my favorite chapter. I changed my mind. So it's not the second one. I love that chapter because it is so rooted in TA. I
Yeah.
looked the games that people play from Eric Burns' book, and I really wanted to update them in the context of the modern Indian marriage. So
Yeah.
I start with why don't you, yes, but. And I think that's the one which I already see so many couples playing in the therapy room.
Yeah.
One of the dynamics I often observe is that one partner, again, I don't want to be, sexist here, but I have to admit it is most often the woman who wants emotional resonance for a problem she's facing when she brings it to the spouse. A spouse who's trained often to be a fixer will come in and just give a suggestion. And there starts that game of a series of why don't you, yes, buts. And again, one of my tasks in couples therapy is to help people really talk about what they're really wishing for when they approach their partner. What does that bid for connection uniquely mean to that person? And it is often just the simple act of the space to be heard and to be okay with whatever they are feeling. And that is something that has to be taught. Yeah. So that's one example of a game that plays out very often.
Yeah, the why don't you, yes, but which which happens every hour of every day, I suppose, between couples, parents, and children. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, why is that chapter your favorite?
One is that it's my favorite because I do have a very strong fondness, and I think I always will, for the world of TA. And in fact, I am looking for ways to marry the model of couples therapy that I've studied with my training in TA.
Yeah.
And this chapter for me was a bridge for that because I could immediately see how games show up in couples relationships.
Yeah.
The other one was simply how recognizable these are to people.
Yeah.
And when we take a
Dynamics become so clear when given names like this.
Yeah. So, for example, the other common one is when there is one partner in the relationship who's used to being the angry one. So that's where now I've got you. It manifests itself. And this actually speaks to that piece about repair because this partner may be very self-righteous and not be willing to hear their partner's apology.
Yeah.
So being able to step in and hold up a mirror to the game that is being played can really help that partner slow down and think and notice new behaviors and soften a bit. Another one is, of course, if it weren't for you, we love to blame our partners, right, for everything in our life. So the very act of saying this is a common phenomenon helps people recognize it in their own lives. And when they do that, that's the beginning of individual autonomous change. So that's what I love about games. They just make the dynamics very playfully accessible in a non-pathologizing way.
Yeah. And it makes repetitive patterns clearer, I think.
Yeah.
I think many of your chapters, are you connecting games to TA, but apology, repair, even the connection of the choice of the partner, how it's connected to our past. So I see a connection to TA all over. Even the developmental model was published in the Transactional Analysis Journal by Ellen Bader. So I'm somehow seeing your book as TA. Yeah. And you're also talking about a negative spiral, right? Is that the shame loop you're talking about?
Yeah, this particular thing, the shame loop, is also known as the negative cycle in attachment theory. So in very different modalities, there's a similar pattern which shows up. But you are skilled at picking up the TA-ness in the book. And Ellen Bader did have her origins in the world of TA. She trained with Bob and Mary Golding. They were her mentors. That article you're referencing was written, I think, in the year 1983. So that's in her blood. But in the way that the developmental model has evolved, the TA part of it has gone more to the background. So it's not as overt.
Yeah. And it's okay. These are all, I feel all approaches have different labels, but at the heart, everyone wants healing and autonomy. So it's okay to not get hung up on is this TA. That's
No, but one thing I want to say is I think one of the brilliant things about TA is how accessible it makes therapy, right? So when people are able to name a pattern and recognize it, immediately that's very it hits home.
Yeah.
I think that why don't you yes, but as a game, it has
Yeah.
an advantage over the concept of self-differentiation, which can be a mouthful and a little hard for people to understand. It requires more explanation. So
Yeah.
if you want to see the strengths of TA, and I try to actively bring it into the couples therapy works.
Lovely. Okay, I think there are lots of questions. We can go back to the group.
Yes.
I think, if we were to start with some of the Padmajas.
Yes.
Ah.
What about the power equation within the marriage? So connected to the belief system that one has grown up with, especially in our culture. So power is very much at play. And here, a couple of the dynamics that do show up could be things like, of course, gender dynamics, right? What have we grown up believing about the role of men and the role of women?
If I may explain my question, yeah. So this is something that I've noticed in my life. Okay. So the girls have grown up much faster, better than boys, I think. So boys want to say that I'll do the freedom. I mean, I want a partner, I don't want a wife, and all of it. But when it comes down to the ground reality, they still expect their partners to be somewhat what their mothers were like. Yeah. And I think there's a large amount of conflict that happens because the girls really expect their partners to be a little different, from what, their parents' generation may have been. That's what I meant by, you go out and work, you can smoke and drink, but you will still be at home to make sure that everything happens fine, just as an example. Yeah. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, I think you're right, Padmaja, that this is a common phenomenon where the woman, especially if you're talking about the modern working Indian woman, it's a double whammy for her, right? Because she's not only expected to show up at work and be a career woman, but she's also been conditioned to be the one who is supposed to take care of the home. And even if it is not said, sometimes there are overt beliefs of what has been modeled when she was younger that puts a lot of pressure on her. So I think it's important to acknowledge that while it may not be true in all cases, there's definitely a bias of this sort. And I think that's where the whole piece about the invisible labor and the emotional labor that is there on women to be the ones who are actually nurturing the relationship. Yeah, the ones who are playing that role of bringing her and her partner together, keeping the whole family together. That can feel like an unfair equation. And I often do see this pattern of an over-functioning woman and a passive man. Okay. And how I think I like to deal with it is get each partner to see what their contribution is, because it's also unfair if that woman keeps on blaming the man and doesn't recognize that sometimes it's her need for control, her perfectionist tendencies, her inability to rest, her desire to have it all, that is causing a lot of pressure. And that her nagging while also trying to micromanage and control the husband is not helping the situation. And often the passive partner, if it's the husband in this case, does need to learn how to initiate, how to become more active, how to stop saying, but I help her, I do what she asks me. Yeah. And to really develop the skills of emotional maturity and to learn to self-reveal. So there's work on both sides there. Vaishali, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. So in your experience, what has been more helpful, the couples therapist being the individual therapist also for the respective partners? Because otherwise, if they have individual therapists, then it becomes a whole complex system to deal with.
Yeah. In my experience, Vaishali, if I had the bandwidth, I would actually like to be their individual therapist, because I just feel like that cohesiveness would work very well. But from a purely practical perspective, I think it is useful to have a team of individual therapists and the couples therapist working together. I do also think there are some advantages to this model, because this means that each of them can establish a solid long-term relationship with their individual therapist, which would be hard to do with me as their couples therapist. So I think purely from a practice and a balance perspective, I like this model of working in close tandem with the individual therapists and letting each partner have their own relationship with them.
Thank you.
All right. So I can ask you the next question. In one of your chapters, you say love is more than a feeling. Yeah. So would you tell us what that means?
Yeah, I think this is such a big misconception that love is something you're supposed to feel. And I think it's Dr. Alexandra Solomon who writes something along the lines of we like the idea of falling in love, but we don't really know what it means to live in love. Because things do get difficult and the rosy honeymoon stage does fade, and that requires a lot more skill. So I like the idea of love as an action verb. And as I've mentioned throughout the book, because love is work, marriage is work, the very act of really deciding to invest time, attention, and energy in the act of loving is what can help a couple. And what this looks like is making an effort to notice when your partner is reaching out to connect to you. Okay, Dr. John Gottman calls these bids for connection. So making a bid for your partner's attention is an act. It takes effort. Noticing that and putting away the phone, putting away your newspaper or whatever to turn towards them is an act of love. Having the discipline to actually create time for the relationship, which is reliable and which can bring you closer together. Having rituals, taking the time to know your own self and your love language, to understand that of your partner, to acknowledge and appreciate them for what they do rather than just keep criticizing them and noticing the negative. All of these are acts, they aren't feelings. And these are the things that actually help a couple over the long term to really build a solid bond and to keep it.
Yeah. So much intentionality and effort, to see signs of love, and that may not. So even someone coming to pick you up, or sometimes it's the love languages we talk about, recognizing love like that, and also showing and investing time. All of that. So it's so much more. It's so much intentionality and effort.
It is
like a practice.
It is a practice.
Yeah. So what are the core skills that you think people need to make a marriage work? Yeah.
I think the core skills, actually, I like using the framework of differentiation. Okay.
Yeah.
These can be seen primarily as being of two parts. Okay. So one side of the coin is self-differentiation. This is the art of actually going inward and knowing what I think, what I feel, what I desire, and also being able to express it to my partner in a way that they can hear it, which means being vulnerable instead of demanding. Really expressing myself gently instead of badgering them.
Yeah.
That's self-differentiation. And it involves a remarkable amount of honesty and courage, because sometimes we may feel ashamed to ask for what we're really feeling. For example, if there's somebody who really is getting upset because they aren't having enough sex, it requires some practice and some skill to be able to actually go out and recognize that, first of all, and name it to their partner.
Yeah.
The other side of the coin is other differentiation. And that means you have to be able to hold still and stay steady and curious and empathetic when your partner is expressing something, even when it's something that you don't agree with, even when it's something that's difficult to hear. So using the example of sex, the husband in this case, if the wife was the one who was wishing for more sex, would need to really hold aside his defensiveness or his complaints about the way she nags him long enough to be able to really see her hurt and to really not take it personally or as a sign of his failure as a man. So when self-differentiation and other differentiation are developed in both partners, that is when they can really begin to connect in a very different way. Other ancillary skills I see as the skills of boundaries, of learning how to give generously and to receive without being entitled, the skills of negotiation, the skills of conflict resolution. But all of these can actually be subsumed under the skills of differentiation.
Yeah. I think even the simplest things are difficult to ask for. Attacking is so much easier, isn't it?
Yeah.
So in our class, we do an exercise, simple idea of strokes, right? You say, what is the stroke that you would ask for if you could just ask for it freely? And some of the simplest strokes are, look at me and smile at me when I enter the house. Treat me like I matter. When I say something, look interested, be curious, ask questions. And even having to ask for some of these can create a lot of shame, isn't it? It's something I shouldn't have to work for. A lot of people believe that, and I think that's true too, but unfortunate that sometimes it doesn't come without asking.
Yeah.
But yeah, learning to ask in a
Yeah.
vulnerable way without saying, otherwise it becomes anger over something else, isn't it?
That's right.
You haven't picked up the laundry, or it doesn't get morphed like that. But the real hurt is, can you show me that you love me?
Yeah, yeah. And you're right that people tend to have this idea that it should come naturally. And if in
Yeah.
fact they have to ask for it, then the meaning is lost. If I have to
Yeah.
ask you to do this for me, then what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a recipe for a lot of resentment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in fact, I find that the principles that we use of emotional literacy, right? It's 100% okay to ask for what you want 100% of the time,
Yeah.
coupled with the idea that the other person has the right to say no.
Yeah.
I have actually used that actively in couples therapy to let them know that they have the permission to ask for what they really wish for, and there's no ask which is too big or too small.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other complaint I've often encountered is, you can't treat me like everybody else. There's this, like, there's a couple that I worked with where the person said, I do so much for you, and the wife said, but you do it for everybody else. So
Yeah.
how am I special? So all of these are cultural pressures, I think, that I have to be, something for me has to be unique, and it should not be there for anybody else. So I was just remembering that part of decontamination is also to educate that this whole idea of this unique, special relationship, which is so magical, is often culturally imposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Culturally imposed, I think there's an element of attachment styles also there, because in my observation, it would typically be the anxiously attached partner who would be saying something like, prove to me that I am important, prove to me that I am special, prove to me this relationship is primary.
Yeah.
And so there's work to do on that partner's side, right?
Yeah.
There's also work to do on the other partner's side, who often tends to be the avoidant one. They do tend to try and really run away from the intensity of the relationship, especially when there's conflict, and turn either to the family of origin or to friends, and to sort of hedge their bets and not let this relationship become too important to them. So that's a dynamic I often see as well.
Yeah, and that also highlights to me how important personal healing is to heal the relationship. So we look at our own vulnerabilities and our own attachment styles and how we bring it and how they interlock with each other.
Yeah. This reminds me of something I should clarify for those who were asking about individual therapy. I do a fair amount of individual therapy in the context of the couples therapy. So I might spend a whole session talking to one partner about their patterns, their vulnerabilities, their hurts, where it originated. And the role of the other partner in this case is to be a witness and to see if they can muster up empathy for the part of their partner's story which has nothing to do with them. And it can be a very useful thing, because then the partner who's in the witnessing role, they just get to see that it's not all about them. They can then be less defensive. So, it's couples therapy, I really think, is an art where there is individual therapy going on, there's interpersonal work going on, there's work between me and the client, and it's really on a session to session basis on their goals and their healing at any point of time.
I think we can look at some questions on chat. I think there's a question from Naina. You're saying non-heterosexual couples. Do they show up in therapy in the Indian context? And what differences have you seen?
I have to say, Nana, I'm sure they show up. They haven't yet shown up in my practice. I would absolutely love to work with non-heterosexual couples. And what differences? I can't answer this from personal experience because I haven't worked with them. But I would say that I'm sure that amongst the things that they're dealing with, this set of people also deal with a lot of secrecy and shame, just like a polyamorous couple would. So I think that bit of cultural context has to be recognized in working with these people. Beyond that, it would be very individual on who is sitting in front of me. But I'd be very keen to work with such couples. So if there's anyone that anybody here on this call is aware of who's looking for a couples therapist, please send them my way. Then there is, who else?
Using strokes and okay. It's Tanaya. A partner being passive and the other doing the heavy lift because of their controlling nature.
Yeah. And my question is, how can this be dealt with, especially if the micromanager is not willing to accept their anxiety of losing control? You know, this can be tough. I have worked with such clients. It can be a slow burn because underneath this desire to not lose control is actually terror. Typically, this person may have grown up being what we call the parentified child, right? The one who was supposed to be in charge, maybe even attend to their parents' feelings. Maybe they were the rescuer for one of their parents. Maybe they saw a lot of conflict and it was really important for them to feel in control. So there's a lot of fear, and it hasn't been helpful for them that their passive partner has not stepped up before. Okay. So in this case, I think it is a lot about individual therapy and individual work. It is a lot about creating enough safety in our sessions for this person to start to begin to be vulnerable. It is sometimes also me being pretty strong, because this person can also, in their anxiety, show up as very dominant and try to control the session. So this is where my leadership abilities can get tested. And I do need to be able to, even when they are being, difficult in terms of pushing back, saying there's no problem in me, what am I supposed to do when he doesn't actually do this? So I remember the case of somebody who said that, but if, I let him just say that he's in charge and then the laundry doesn't get done, then what will happen? So my role in that moment was to invite her to say, yeah, so then what will happen if the laundry doesn't get done? What will happen? And, she was able to slow down enough to see that it wasn't like, a catastrophe, the way that that simple act had built itself up in her head. So there are multiple ways of working with such partners, but you usually involve recognizing the fear underneath and creating safety and also appropriate challenge in the therapy room. Madhu has another question about using strokes in couples therapy. When and how much can I give strokes individually in a group session? This is a space I'm still tentative on. Like I said, I think giving them lots and lots and lots of strokes is very important in couples therapy because they're typically quite dejected. And they do not recognize their own strengths. They don't recognize their partner's strengths. It's also risky because sometimes I might stroke a partner for his honesty and the wife is really pissed off with me and is thinking that, I am biased against her and I'm encouraging or validating him. So it takes some thinking, it takes some care, it takes some courage on my part. But I am a big believer in reminding people of their strengths, both individually and as a couple. And often the reason that the partner might get pissed off is that they are pulling for symbiosis. They don't want to differentiate. They need to differentiate. But what they actually want often is to stay stuck. They still want to be in that safety of that cocoon which they initially were gunning for. So sometimes my strokes might be for something that is actually saying, for example, to someone who is thinking about leaving the relationship, I might actually stroke that person for having the courage to talk about all the reasons why leaving the relationship would be awesome. Okay. And this obviously runs the risk of the partner who's listening to get livid. But my hope is that by the time we do such a challenging piece of work, that partner has understood the value of honesty, because living in a lie has led them to that place where they are today. And if they're trying to create a new future, they need to be open to different things. So I hope that answers the question, but yeah, I would say stroke the hell out of them. Okay. Deepti, shall we take one more, Aruna?
Sure. Yeah, we can take one more and
Yeah.
Go for it.
Deepti is asking, how should one proceed when a spouse is unwilling to participate in couples therapy and does not believe there are any issues in the relationship? This is a really tough one, okay? There are two schools of thought here. One school of thought, which I originally subscribed to and where I have seen someone like, Pete Pearson, one of my mentors, work with, is that the therapist can do a lot to create motivation even in an unwilling partner. Okay. So as long as they have shown up for the therapy itself can be used to create safety, create trust, create rapport, and create hope. Okay. Increasingly of late, my personal style has changed, and I am finding I enjoy working with couples where both partners actually have at least a base level of motivation to do the work. Because I have found that if they're not willing to look inwards, if they're very, very, fixated on blaming their partner and pointing fingers, at some point I will get frustrated and then we'll end up not having a good experience in couples therapy. So I would say, basis my own bandwidth, my own personal style of working, I have found that it works better to work with motivated clients. In a case like this, I would say either the couple has the option of going in with a therapist who's willing to work harder and willing to work with this ambiguity about whether one partner is actually going to do the work. Or in such a case, maybe individual therapy for one of the partners or both of the partners can be helpful. Because sometimes people find couples therapy so threatening that they may just refuse to do the work. But if they're able to establish a safe relationship with an individual therapist or coach, it can help them to soften and to also learn about their own patterns. So these are the options which I think are there in that case.
Yeah, so I'm aware of the time. I'm also aware that there are more questions. How do you want to do it? We wanted to also have the last 5 minutes for people to share what has been significant for them.
Yeah.
So maybe
I am thinking that we should actually move into that. Maybe we can do one more question, Aruna, so that we have the 5 minutes.
sure.
I'm
So,
happy. Yeah, I'm happy to also note down any other questions and find different ways to answer them, either on social media or through an email. I can also leave my email ID in the chat for those who might have further questions. But for now, I thought maybe we can just quickly take one more, which is Madhulika's is next on the list. Okay, that's actually.
yeah, Chandni has her hand up.
Chandni, you want to go for it?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So my question was around, as a couples therapist, how do I decide when to bring this to an end, especially if we are just moving in loops and there's no um, accountability from either of them. And I feel this can be brought to an end. But is there a universally accepted number which says number of sessions, and you can call it? Any inputs on that?
I don't think there's a universally accepted number of sessions at all. I would say it's very situational. I have always found in such cases, Chandni, the very ethical practice of supervision extremely helpful for me to examine what's going on. Why am I getting this urge to fire this couple? What's going on for me? Is it really fair? And what is it that I am not doing? What do I need to change in my own approach? Or is it a fact that I am just getting so drained and experiencing that there is no willingness to move with the couple? In which case, after having thoroughly examined this question from an ethical perspective, I think my next step would be to really come forward to the couple and have a conversation with them about what I've been thinking and why, explaining to them why I'm thinking that. Why do I believe that therapy is no longer serving them? What are the choices that lie in front of us? Recontracting, right? We use contracting in PA, it's so powerful. So this looks like it would be a time to recontract and to even see, do we have a new contract? Are we here to work together? So I would say that that's the approach that I would follow.
Okay. And do you do supervision for couple therapists?
I am hoping to start that very soon.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, shall we move to sharing?
Yes.
Thank you, Yash. I think it was so engaging and so enlivening, this conversation, very informative, very stimulating. Let's see what impact it has left on the group.
Yeah, I loved your questions, and I also loved the engagement of the group and the questions just flying in. I love that we ran out of time, but I do hope to be able to answer them. And yes, would love to hear from the group if you could reflect on something that is staying with you that you would actually want to explore some more and just name that would be very useful feedback.
So, Yash, for me, I think the entire session was useful. I have read half of your book. I have not finished it yet. But for me, the biggest thing that you said today was to, hold my leadership while, whatever they are discussing, and to hold that space and not kind of, get off it and get carried away in their conversation is something very useful. Second, stroke the hell out of them. That's something that I have been tentative about. Also, the questions that came here in the session were something that I think I was thinking about, but not able to word them. So that was definitely very beautiful for me. Thank you for doing this. And thank you for writing the book with so many resources and questions. They are excellent to kind of, start using. And I did that work on myself on on some of the chapters. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm happy to hear that. I also want to take this opportunity to make a shameless plug and say, please, if you've read the book, kindly review it on Amazon. It's incredibly hard these days to get reviews up there. So anybody who's read the book, I would really love your review there.
Count me in. I'll share my review soon.
Thank you, Madhu. Anyone else?
Fiza has a hand up.
Go for it, Fiza.
Thank you. Thank you, Aruna. Thank you, Yash. It was a very insightful session. I think something that I'm taking back and would keep exploring more would be the games couples play, especially in association with how attachment styles also play a role there, as we discussed. So I think that's going to stay with me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Fiza.
Yes, the comments also. Very informative, clear, practical, lovely session. How we invite young couples, new in relationships, etc. Yeah, I can see my relationships with my partners are replicas of the. So yeah, so lots of comments there to look at. The 3 hands up. Maybe we can hear these 3 people and then close. Is that okay?
Let's do that. And Aruna, will I get the chat? I would love to be able to read these later.
I'll download the chat. Yeah, yeah.
So we have Anita, Padma, and then Sneha on my screen. You want to just go for it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Aruna and Yashodhara. It was a very insightful session and many takeaways. It was like a workshop to me.
Mission
And for example, the stages of development which you related with the TA concepts and the questions of Aruna was reflecting, it was resonating from like the core skills for marriage. And I think all the questions that I wanted to ask, Aruna covered it. And
good job.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aruna and Yashodhara. Waiting to read your book. Yeah, I'll get it as soon as possible.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Padma and Sneha, and then we'll close.
Yeah, thank you, Aruna. Thanks, Yashodhara. I think I came here after reading your book, the one that that led me, the 2 of you wrote, and that led me here. And I'm so glad I was here because this is like what you had conceived as that workshop. I think we've been like privy to that as well, and I just ordered your book. I'm like looking forward to reading it. The moment that landed so well for me was that beautiful question from Aruna on the core skills. Self and other differentiation was something that I'm really going to take away from this.
Thank you, Padma.
Thank you.
So yes, the section you spoke about love not just being a feeling, but the work that you need to do, that really resonated with me, especially since I also my partner and I did a couple of counseling sessions before we got married, and I feel like despite that, just being aware that, hey, look, yeah, we need to work towards this and all of that, it's even having the knowledge makes it feel like hard work. So it's not like, oh, I always knew about it and taking it for granted. So just hearing you also speak about it resonated. And also that comment you made about not to make a relationship undermining statement. So as somebody who's training to go into therapy, I'm just going to remember it as not making any kind of system undermining statement.
Lovely. Thank you. That's so thoughtful. And I love that you did the counseling before marriage. I also want to say that the original idea for the book, I am now piloting a marriage foundation course, and I've already got 2 signups, and I'm very excited.
Lovely.
Yeah. I want to say thank you to everyone here, and especially Aruna, for creating this space and for the beautiful questions. I loved it.
Please share your email
Thank
ID.
you for sharing. Staying till the very end, folks. I've seen some people drop off. I know it's a busy Sunday evening for most people with families, but thank you for staying on. Thank you for joining. It was wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Yash, and I wish your book and your courses great success. And of course, yeah, we will keep interacting.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aruna. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Aruna. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
I'll just stay for a minute.
Yeah, my Mac is and I'll see how I can download chat. 1 minute, save chat.
Oh, good.
Where has it saved it? Let's save it again. I think it will be in my downloads, I suppose.
Yeah, in your clipboard or something. I'm also just taking, just giving a minute and seeing if I can.
Can you also save chat?
I'm just seeing if I can. I've copied it. I'm seeing if I can just paste it onto my email.
Oh, I don't know where it's saved. Okay, my battery is really low. How was it? I'll get these two people to leave.
I've only saved part of the chat. Huh? I don't know. It didn't. The whole thing didn't get copied.
It's copied somewhere. I don't know where it's copied. Save chat. Show in Finder. Where is it? I'm just moving it to downloads. Okay, I've saved a copy in downloads. Yeah, I can send it to you.
Okay, lovely, lovely. Got it. I think it was great.
Yeah, lovely. It was. I mean, your expertise was shining through. I'm just going to plug my. And I think it was very engaging, very accessible, very respectful of all the questions that were coming. So it's just wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I think there's a lot of interest in this space also.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might even choose couples work or come to you for supervision.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. We should talk about my supervision journey soon.
Sure.
All
Actually,
right.
my husband has just come after 10 days.
I go give him a big hug.
Yeah, so so we'll catch up when I'm more present. Yeah, I'm a little rushed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great. It was wonderful. Thank you. Bye.